Where is victim 3 in the Sean Combs case, and did we just get official word she is not going to show up to court? We're diving into the latest developments, all the time she was apparently mentioned so far during testimony in this trial, and if she doesn't testify, is that a major loss to the prosecution? What about for the defense? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. What on earth is going on with victim 3 in the Sean Diddy Combs federal sex crimes case? I mean, this is something. According to CNN, victim 3 is not expected to take the stand, with a source quoted as saying she didn't want to testify. Now, we've talked about this in previous episodes of Sidebar. Came up during jury selection in this case, that victim 3, she apparently couldn't be found. Yeah, prosecutor Rena Paul indicated to the court that they were having a tough time getting in touch with her or her attorney, and even if they did make contact with her, it wasn't guaranteed that she was going to show up to testify. And during pretrial litigation, it came out that victim 3 actually wanted to testify not using a pseudonym, so she would be revealing her identity. So what's happening now is a little bit of an about-face, right? Victim 3, by the way, was mentioned in Combs' superseding criminal indictment, where he has been charged with sex trafficking by force, fraud, coercion, racketeering conspiracy, transportation to engage in prostitution. In fact, it reads, Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims, including but not limited to 3 female victims, victim 1, victim 2, and victim 3, to engage in commercial sex acts. In connection with the commercial sex acts, Combs provided the victims with, among other things, monetary payments, career opportunities, and payment of rent and housing expenses. So, an important witness for prosecutors to establish a pattern of sexual exploitation and abuse, right? Strength in numbers, especially with Cassie, victim 1, her testimony last week that she was forced into performing these freak-offs with male sex workers. But who exactly is victim 3? Well, according to CNN, 3 sources familiar with the case confirmed that it is a woman named Gina, who we have heard about a lot in this trial already, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit later. But why am I talking about this? Because other than the fact that reporting from CNN says she may not testify, what happened last week? Well, Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, said this to the court. Your Honor, can I put something on the court's radar screen, a bigger issue? This all relates to Gina, who is out of the case. Gina is not coming. So I think the relevance of this has plummeted dramatically since we are not going to be having Gina as a witness. Then you got prosecutor Christy Slavic, who responded, Your Honor, Gina is very much a part of this case. We have heard plenty of testimony on Gina. She is certainly relevant. The jury has heard plenty about Gina. In fact, the defense has made her a central issue in the relationship between the defendant and Miss Ventura. Furthermore, Gina is identified in the indictment, and the government is entitled to present proof related to her. Agnifilo responds, My point is not an indictment issue. The government can call Gina if it wants to. It might be difficult. It might be hard to do. They are the United States of America. They can get Gina into this courtroom if that is what they want to do. They are choosing not to. Hey everybody, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to this? Yeah, well, Morgan & Morgan is stepping in to fight to hold these food companies accountable. With decades of experience fighting large corporations, they are ready to stand up for the families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, then visit www.forthepeople.com/food or scan the QR code on screen to learn more. So before I get into what was said about Gina in the trial so far, I want to break some of this down, try to make sense of what's happening behind the scenes. Let me bring on right now Rena Paul, former federal prosecutor, to talk about this. Rena, thanks so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what is going on with victim 3? Can you make sense of this?
Well, from the papers, victim 3 was mentioned in the superseding indictment, and she seems to be referenced as one of 3 victims that the government says in the indictment engaged in commercial sex acts, which we understand to be a reference now, hearing the evidence in the trial, to these freak-offs. What's happening in that colloquy that you just outlined from the defense and the prosecutor is a little hard to tell. It seems like the defense is both asking for Gina, or victim number 3, not to be included in the evidence submitted to the jury, but also that the defense has used that relationship as a motive for victim 1, which is Cassie, to testify or discussed her in the testimony of Cassie.
If they issued a subpoena for her to testify, doesn't she have to testify? Doesn't she have to appear?
Yes, a subpoena demands and requires legally the appearance of the witness, and the government could go even further if it wanted to, depending on the circumstances, to request what's called a material witness warrant. That is a piece of paper where the government requests and the court can allow for such a warrant to be issued if there is showing that such a witness is material. Now, I don't think that that's relevant in this case. I don't think that she is a material witness such that it would warrant that. But yes, I mean, to your point, if she is subpoenaed, she should be required to come.
But the problem is, if you force her to testify, and I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if there's a location issue, if something happened, if she is just reluctant, she doesn't want to testify anymore in this case. But assuming that's what it is, if you force her to testify and you're the prosecution and you were relying on her testimony, what happens if she is not as compliant as she was in the past? What happens if she refuses to answer questions? She says, I don't remember. She's more of a hostile witness. That could backfire for the prosecution, right?
The prosecution in general takes witnesses as they find them. So the purpose is to get truthful testimony right on the witness stand. If that truthful testimony is inconsistent, incomplete, potentially hostile, I guess, to the government's case, then they take it where they find it. The witness comes on to stand to swear to tell the truth, and that's what is meant to happen. The government needs to abide by that.
But do you think they know where she is? Do you think there's a conversation happening with her or her attorney right now about negotiating what her testimony is going to be, whatever reservation she may have? Is that something that's typical in a case like this? I mean, I guess I have to ask you. I think she's an important witness, and we'll talk more about it, but she can't be the first person who has, again, I don't know this for sure, but assuming she has cold feet, she can't be the first witness who's like, I don't want to do this and I'm not showing up.
Yeah, and let's talk about the difficulty of being a witness in general. I have been a federal prosecutor, a state prosecutor. I'm now in practice working in sexual misconduct cases, and I can tell you that there are many reasons why it's difficult to show up to a witness stand. I read through a motion that the government filed before the trial began, asking for a pseudonym to be used for the victims that are referenced in the indictment. And the government said that they were seeking to prevent unnecessary public disclosure of the victims' identities and the harassment from the media and others, undue embarrassment, and other adverse consequences that would almost certainly follow if these women were forced to reveal their true names publicly at trial. And we have seen the barrage of media about this case, so certainly that makes sense.
But I guess it does feel strange, right? If she wanted to testify not using a pseudonym or was seemingly open to it, there might be something going on. Is it unusual that her or her attorney would not be responding if that reporting is true? What do you make of that?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say without more information, but in general, thinking about testifying as a witness is a difficult prospect. You have to show up, you have to walk up into a public stand, you have to take
especially in a case like this, yeah.
Yeah, where there's media, inevitably you're going to be revealed publicly in some way. There are a lot of considerations and complications around the desire to testify versus what the actuality of testifying is for any person that goes up onto a witness stand.
Can the defense bring up that she didn't show up? Can they bring that up? If she never comes to the stand, she doesn't testify, can the defense raise that in some sort of cross-examination or closing argument?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure who else they could ask about her. It doesn't seem that she has, from what I have read, which is not everything, it does not seem that there is another attachment to this victim, meaning I'm not sure who they could cross-examine about her presence, or her lack of presence.
But could they say in a closing argument, and because we're going to get into her, she was mentioned, if we're assuming victim 3 is Gina, mentioned multiple times, can the defense say, they talked about multiple victims. They couldn't even get one of the victims to come forward. She didn't want to testify. Maybe she realized that, she had a guilty conscience. She falsely accused Sean Combs, didn't want to be the government's puppet. I'm just making up an argument here. I came off the top of my head. But could the defense say that in a closing argument, or no, that wouldn't be allowed?
This comes down to reading the indictment and what the government is said they are going to prove versus what the evidence has showed. So when the defense is making their closing, strategically, I think they will pick and choose depending on what has come out and what is in line with their defense. I did not see a sex trafficking count in the indictment for victim 3. Certainly,
that's correct.
That would be a difficult count to keep going if there is no one testifying to that evidence. So those kinds of arguments around what pieces of evidence were missing. That said, the government is saying that victim 3 has been mentioned. There has been evidence of victim 3. So that would be a question for the jury and a back and forth.
It is part of the racketeering charge, right? She is part of this pattern of racketeering activity, this pattern of sexual abuse of women, of sex trafficking of women, this overall criminal enterprise that Combs allegedly was running. That's what they're trying to, the narrative that they're trying to move forward for the jury, at least the prosecution is. So I do wonder, Rena, and again, I'll get into the times that she was mentioned in the trial, but I do wonder if victim 3, allegedly Gina, doesn't show up, doesn't testify, if that's a big blow to the prosecution's case. Why do I say that? Because to me, she feels like an important potential witness. You remember earlier on in the trial, Combs' former assistant, George Kaplan, testified that he saw Combs throw apples at Gina during a fight in Miami. Kaplan testified that he threw them hard and that Combs was very angry. The New York Times reported that Gina had sat down for an interview in 2019 for a YouTube show called Unwind with Tasha Kaye, and she claimed that Combs physically abused her, stomped on her, punched her, similar to what Cassie had testified to, that Combs forced her to have 2 abortions, that she had texts and note app posts to corroborate her account. So you could see why she's a valuable witness for the prosecution. It makes me wonder, big loss for them if she doesn't testify?
From what I read in the indictment, there are 3 victims referenced in the racketeering conspiracy charge, right? So the government is trying to prove a pattern, an enterprise, and any one of these acts is not necessary to prove that case or that charge. To your point, we're talking about the quantity of evidence, the quality of evidence, what the jury is going to evaluate when they determine whether or not this racketeering conspiracy has been proved. And certainly having more people testify seems like, on its face, it may be more persuasive. That said, each person that testifies comes with their own determination of credibility and their own, it seems like from what's written in the indictment, which references a romantic relationship to these victims, the history of the relationship with Combs that it seems from the indictment that the indictment is alleging these 3 victims may have had.
Yeah, there's a strength in numbers argument. Look, I'll tell you this much. So I host the lunchtime show for Law&Crime on our YouTube. Every day during the Combs trial, we get a ton of viewer questions. First time anybody's hearing about it, come check us out. We do it between 1 p.m., 12:45 p.m. to around 2 p.m. every day. And there was a lot of questions regarding victim 3. And more specifically, I don't know if you're surprised about this, there was a lot of questions where people assumed that Combs possibly caused her to be unavailable, that he paid her off, that he intimidated her. There's no evidence of that. But isn't that interesting what people are thinking at this point in the case?
In the indictment, there is reference to paying off $100,000 for the videotape in the hotel. I think that's referenced in the indictment. So I can understand people asking that question based on that piece of the indictment. Certainly impossible to tell. There's been no reports of that from the government. You would imagine that if that were the case, if she were being made unavailable as a result of him, that's something that we may hear about.
Yeah, I mean, they've said bribery, right? Bribery is one of the underlying predicate crimes for racketeering. There were allegations that while he was in federal lockup at the MDC, he was improperly trying to contact people. So I can see why people, make that conclusion. But I want to talk more about Gina, alleged victim number 3, about the testimony, what's come out during trial, because Gina has been mentioned multiple times. So, as I mentioned, CNN is reporting that sources say this is Gina, and you heard the prosecution and the defense refer to a Gina. So again, assuming victim 3 is Gina. Here is a portion of what Tenny Garagos had to say in her defense opening statement to the jury. And she was talking about Diddy's relationship to Cassie here. Quote, "You will see that over and over again in this decade-long relationship. These two fought about his inability to remain faithful. I expect Cassie to tell you about the jealousy of Kim Porter and another girlfriend that he started dating in 2014 named Gina. This jealousy is something that plagued their relationship, even the day of the Intercontinental video in the elevator bank. That much told us during jury selection that you saw. That day, unfortunately, jealousy was on full display. But the evidence will show you that in the summer of that year of 2018, she woke up to a gossip site that showed a photo of Combs and Gina, the same woman who he had started having an affair with in 2014, or a relationship with, I should say, walking out of the Standard Hotel together. Now, Rena, let's start there. The value of Gina as a witness for the defense, what is it?"
That's what I was alluding to earlier. It does appear that from that opening statement, the defense is arguing, consistent with their broader opening statement, that this isn't racketeering, that this isn't sex trafficking, that this is a domestic violence relationship. This is a relationship between two people that was violent many times over, and there was reasons and motivations for arguments between them, this being one of them, the relationship, the infidelity being one of them. That's the defense's argument, which is why when I'm hearing the defense also asking to have evidence of victim number 3 suppressed in some way, it makes me wonder what they're going to be arguing in summation. Will the defense evolve slightly? Has it evolved from the evidence in the trial in terms of what they're going to close on? Certainly, if they were suggesting in the beginning that this was one of the reasons why there was jealousy and upset that caused this upset between them and ultimately violence on their client's behalf, I'll be curious to see what they argue if there's no evidence of her in the trial.
Right. So in other words, he was violent with her not to force her into freak-offs or a sex trafficking enterprise. He was controlling her. He was checking up on her, calling her, seeing what she was doing, because he thought, she was going to be cheating because he was cheating, but not as a way to control her as a sex trafficking victim. And I'm going to mention in a minute what Cassie had to say about Gina. But do you get the sense that they're also making the argument, this jealousy that Cassie may have had, whether it was for Gina or Kim Porter, this is a motivation for her to come after Sean Combs? Do you think they went that far, or am I wrong?
I didn't read that in the opening statement. I read the opening statement to be a call to the jury to say the charges here are not the correct charges. These are federal charges and they should be state charges. I don't think they went as far as to say that, but that's the intimation. The intimation is this is a domestic violence case, this is a state case, as opposed to a federal case where we need to be proving as the government a racketeering conspiracy, an enterprise. I think that's where they were going. Difficult for them to say and argue when there's videotape of violence that this is a made-up story.
And I want to now bring us to Cassie's testimony when she mentioned Gina. So here's an example. Quote, "And do you recall a time in April 2014 when you learned of someone named Gina?" "Yes." "How did you learn about Gina?" "I honestly don't remember exactly how I found out. It might have been like Associate Media or something like that." "What was your reaction to that?" "I was really upset." "What did you learn?" "That time, 2014, I think I just learned that they were spending time together. I didn't really know." "And what do you recall Mr. Combs' response was when you approached him about this?" "I honestly don't remember, but I feel like he denied it to some extent." "Yeah." "Did there come a time when you learned that Mr. Combs was still with Gina?" "Yes." "And in fact, he did not break it off with Gina, as you were led to believe?" "Yeah." "And did that upset you?" "At the time, yeah, it did." And then there's this. "Were there multiple times when you found out that he was getting back together with Gina?" "Yeah, I would say there were multiple, yeah." "And that prompted arguments between the two of you, right?" "Yeah." And then there's this. "But you reacted when you saw on social media that Mr. Combs was with some other female, right?" "Yeah, mainly Gina, yeah." "Was Gina the main problem in your relationship?" "I would say." "Was Mr. Combs consistently denying his relationship with Gina to you, for the most part? And how did that make you feel?" "Not great." And then there is this text exchange between her and Combs that was read. This was when she was being questioned by Combs' counsel, Anna Esteveo. Quote, "I'll read Mr. Combs. Can I not get a chance to make things right? It seems like you're blaming everything on me. It's like you have anger to me. I haven't taken care of you. Can you read your messages?" I'm not running around telling our business, but my family knows because I need their support right now. You took care of me materialistically, not where I needed it. Can we go to the next page? Can you keep reading, please? I have lived in this bubble by myself for too long. I'm too dope. You may not be happy, but maybe it's because you surround yourself with people that always take from you. I don't need you taking care of Kim, Sarah, and Gina. I needed to love you and put me first. Rena, what do you think the jury takes away from that?
I don't know what the jury takes away, but I know what the defense
What do
is
you
trying
take away? What
to
do you
do.
take away from that?
I'll tell you what I think the defense is trying to do, which is to bring the jury into a back and forth in a relationship. Everybody who has had an intimate relationship understands the conversations that can happen. And this is, the defense is asking these questions, I would think, to try to bring the jury into a feeling of how the relationship was between Combs and Cassie. Why are they doing that? I would say they're trying to support what they opened on, which is this is a domestic violence case, and this is not a racketeering enterprise, trying to put into the jury's mind the idea that this is complicated, that there's feelings, there's emotions, there's jealousy, and that's on both sides.
And here, by the way, is Carrie Morgan. So this is Ventura's former best friend, also testified in this trial, also talked about Gina too. Again, kind of consistent with what we've been seeing, but here's a portion of what she had to say on the stand when she was questioned by the defense. Quote, "Did you come to learn that there was a woman in Mr. Combs' life named Gina?" "Yes." "And fair to say that Gina was a source of jealousy and worry to Miss Ventura?" "She was a big problem, yes." "Thank you. That's a great way to put it. Tell the jury why Gina was a big problem." She wouldn't go away, basically. He was having like a full-on relationship with this little girl, and Cassie found out about it, and she wouldn't go away. He wouldn't leave her. So it just went on for a really long time. I need to clarify one thing. You called her a little girl. She was a grown adult woman, right? Yes. We looked at her like a little girl. Why do you say that? Because she acted like one, and she was like a little girl. She's much younger than us, I believe. Do you know how old she was at the time? No, she was an adult. Yeah, sorry. So I'm trying to understand, she was acting like a little girl. I want to understand very briefly what you mean. I believe that Cassie was having conversations with her, or they spoke or something. I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't want to say something that I don't. That's fine. Only what you know. And then she apparently says, I'm pretty sure she got pregnant, that Gina girl. And it was a persistent problem. It lasted for years and years and years. Yes, from what I remember. When you said she wouldn't go away, what you're saying, tell me if this is right, is that Mr. Combs was with Gina romantically for many, many years? Yes. And during the same time, he was also with Cassie? Correct. Now, Rena, I also have to wonder, if she doesn't show up, is this a loss to the defense? And by the way, very clear, they wanted to make sure this wasn't a minor, right? They, for a lot of allegations being made about Sean Combs in the civil context, I think they wanted to make it clear that this is not a little girl, this is actually a woman. But you wonder, as you're listening to this, how the defense would have cross-examined her and what benefits they would have gotten from her testimony. And if she doesn't show up, is this a loss to them too?
Potentially. I mean, it's hard to know what she would have said and what they would have crossed her on, but certainly I would imagine that the defense would be hoping for an opportunity to have a discussion with another person with whom Combs had a relationship. And I would imagine that the questioning may be similar to the questioning that the defense was asking of Cassie. Again, back to what they opened on. So trying to put in terms of a trial strategy, additional evidence of domestic violence, of interpersonal relationship, rather than putting the focus on sex trafficking, on the freak-offs, on the possibility that this was a racketeering enterprise, which is a completely different type of case than a one-on-one intimate partner violence case. Those cases are usually state cases.
Rena, before I wrap things up, you think we're going to see victim 3? You think she's going to testify? You think we're going to get a surprise?
Remains to be seen.
Good answer. Rena Paul, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.